Something exciting is happening. Many Jews today feel the need for a revitalized Judaism. People are searching for a more vital and authentic mode of Jewish expression, and more than ever we need to shift, not only physically, but spiritually out of exile mode. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
What is the Kaddish prayer all about? And what does the word Kaddish actually mean?
In order to understand what the Kaddish prayer is all about, we need actually to begin with the second question, namely, what does the word Kaddish mean? Why is this prayer called Kaddish? The word Kaddish is an Aramaic word which means the same as the Hebrew word Kadosh. Kadosh in Hebrew means holy or sanctified, and the word Kaddish in Aramaic means exactly the same thing. In other words, this word is an adjective, which of course is very difficult. How can you describe, how can you refer to a prayer? How can you call a text, give it a name, which is in fact an adjective? That would be like referring to a text, a given text, as hot or cold or red or green. It's not a noun, it's an adjective. It doesn't really make very much sense. This has always bothered me, and I have asked many people and researched to the best of my ability, and I cannot explain, I'm afraid, why this tefillah somehow was labeled by this term Kaddish, which means Kadosh. But if we continue with this theme, the truth of the matter is that Kaddish, as we know it today, as everyone is familiar with it today, is in Aramaic. But it is clear that originally Kaddish, this prayer called, which we refer to today as by the name Kaddish, was once said in Hebrew and not in Aramaic, which also implies that it was not called by this term Kaddish. And the proper term in Hebrew for this prayer would be Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of Hashem's name, because that is the essential theme and concept behind this entire prayer. This tefillah, which we refer to today as Kaddish, or more correctly Kiddush Hashem, is a prayer which explains and expresses the true yearnings and aspirations of the Jewish people, what they would like to see happen here on this earth. This prayer is so special and so powerful because it truly brings to the fore the true yearning and meaning of life and the ultimate goal of our life on this earth, as the Jewish people understand it. It mentions these things, expresses these things in explicit terms. It speaks about the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being recognized and sanctified in the world that He created according to His will, and that this should be recognized throughout the world by all His creations, all human beings. And this is the essential idea, this is the thrust behind this tefillah of Kaddish. And it is a very, very precious and holy tefillah, and also very clearly a very ancient tefillah. We don't know exactly when it began, but it is clear that it is a very ancient tefillah. It is also clear, as perhaps we'll discuss on another occasion, that it originally was in Hebrew, and therefore the correct term for it in Hebrew would be Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of Hashem's name. And the Jewish people have always held this tefillah in very, very high regard.
What is the connection between Kaddish and the deceased?
This too is a very interesting question. And here we cannot refer to very ancient sources because it is clear that there was no connection in the time of Hazal, for example, in the time of the Mishnah, period of the Talmud. There was no connection between this tefillah of Kiddush Hashem or Kaddish and the deceased or death or burial or anything of the sort. This is not mentioned. No such connection is mentioned in the Talmud Bavli or in Talmud Yerushalmi or in the Rambam or in essentially in any very ancient source. What we do see, starting from somewhere in the period of the Geonim, apparently, is the fact that the Kaddish prayer was recited, usually if we're talking about a person's parents passing away, usually by the son, was said at the graveside. There was this connection mentioned already in the latter Geonic period, at least, of Kaddish being said at the time of the burial, not throughout the year of mourning or anything like that, just at the burial itself. And this connection does exist, already going back to that period. Why this connection exists is something which is not fully understood, or there are different explanations and speculations regarding this. One explanation is that it is a kind of tziduk hadin. Tziduk hadin means justifying and accepting the will and the decree of Hashem. If Hashem decrees that a certain thing happen, that a certain person leave this world, we, the Jewish people, understand that we do not run the world, but rather Hashem runs the world, and He decides who lives and who dies, when they live and when they die, as we say on Rosh Hashanah, and we accept the will of Hashem, whatever it may be, whether it causes us joy and gladness, or whether it causes us mourning and sadness. And therefore, this is one of the ideas behind reciting Kaddish, is the acceptance and justification of Hashem's will and His decrees, whatever they may be here on this earth, whether we understand them or not. A second explanation is that it has to do with nehama, with consolation. Human life, human existence is full of happy and joyous events, and full also of very sad and painful events. This is the way of human existence. This is the reality of the human condition, and no one can do anything about it or change this fact of life. The true consolation and peace can only be achieved from the point of view of the Jewish people, from the point of view of a Torah Jew. This can only be achieved fully when we will witness the revelation of Hashem's glory and the knowledge of His existence and the acceptance of His existence and His will and His Torah throughout the world. When this happens, such an event, such a time will be a great consolation for all those who lived their lives with a connection to Hashem, who believed in and cleaved to Hashem, and that is the only true consolation and joy that we can look forward to. As for the painful events, the grieving that all human beings go through in this life, nothing can really make up for that grieving except for this reality of the sanctification and the glory of Hashem's name and His purpose here on earth, which we, the Jewish people, are also commanded to bring about, and we are the agents of this ongoing process in human affairs here on earth. There is a third explanation that I would offer, which is something which occurred to me many years ago, and that is that the connection between the deceased and Kaddish or Kiddush Hashem may have to do with the fact that starting from the period of the First Crusade in the year 1095, according to the Christian calendar, at which time there were huge massacres of Jews in the Rhineland and other areas as the Crusaders made their way from Western Europe to Eretz Israel. At that time, because of the huge bloodletting and massacre of Jews in many communities throughout that part of the world, the Jews began to say Kaddish, which again is Kiddush Hashem, refers to the sanctification of His name, because of the many acts of Kiddush Hashem that took place at that time. Because after all, very often these Crusaders who were at least ostensibly fighting in the name of Christianity were willing to spare the life of a Jew if he accepted Christianity, if he were to kiss the cross and allow himself to be converted, then he would be saved. Very often this was the case. Sometimes the question was not asked and the option was not given, but in many cases it was. And we know from history that very, very few, exceedingly few Jews at that time, in that part of the world, opted to accept Christianity and save themselves in this way. There were many, many acts, thousands upon thousands of individual acts of Kiddush Hashem, people who knew that it was either the cross or the sword, and they chose the sword and refused to accept the cross. This huge historical reality, this reality of many thousands of Jews doing this Kiddush Hashem, this act of Kiddush Hashem, in front of the in full view of both the non-Jewish population and the Jewish population in Western Europe, this reality of Kiddush Hashem apparently caused the Jews of that time to recite this tefillah of Kaddish or Kiddush Hashem in memory of those who had given up their lives in this fashion, this heroic fashion. And as a result of this, over time, it became customary to say the Kaddish for all people who had died, whether it was as a result of an act of Kiddush Hashem or not. And this is apparently how the minhag began. And this helps explain the fact that the minhag of saying Kaddish for the deceased, for one's parents, for example, is clearly an Ashkenazi minhag, something which began in the Middle Ages in Ashkenazi lands. And that is why if you look in the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Ayin Waw in Yoreh De'ah, one sees that the Shulchan Aruch, the Mahaber, Rabbi Yosef Karo, knows nothing about such a minhag. He does not speak about such a minhag of saying Kaddish for 12 months, for a year, after one's parents or other relatives. He only speaks about Kaddish being said at the graveside, at the time of the burial. But it is the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who adds many of the Ashkenazi practices and Piskei Halacha to the Shulchan Aruch. It is he who speaks at great length about the Kaddish and when it is said and for whom it is said and why it is said. And the reasons given there by the Ramah and other Poskim have a lot to do with adding zechuyot, adding credits and benefit to the soul of the deceased. And this is also certainly a valid explanation. But I think the historical explanation that is connected to the huge numbers of Jews who died al Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem's name, because of their adherence to the Torah and their love for Hashem, this I think was the initial, gave the initial impetus to the minhag of saying Kaddish and the connection between Kaddish and the deceased.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.